Welcome to the Artist Academy podcast, a place where we focus on the business side of art to help you attract more customers, increase profits, to ultimately live a life of creativity and financial freedom. I'm your host, Andrea Earhart, and this week's episode features master calligrapher Margaret Shepherd. Margaret has written 20 calligraphy books in her lifelong career and has a lot of information behind what it takes to make a career in lettering. This interview, just to be honest, it's like talking with my grandmother. She's just about stories of her early art career. And, even though I have no interest in switching from murals to calligraphy, I do have some background in it and understand it very small amount. But Margaret's advice made a few light bulbs go off in my head of ways to incorporate lettering even more into niche painting. So, for example, she talks about lettering envelopes for weddings, which would be a really great addition for wedding portrait painters to add as like a packaged wedding deal for you are the artist that paints the bride and groom, and you also do the lettering on the envelopes, and you could do signs. And it's just like, talking with her, even though it's not directly related, it just had so many ideas popping off. So I'm interested to see if you have any ideas as well. But there's so much value in talking with artists who have made a full career in the arts because they've seen it all, right? I'd like to have a cup of tea with Margaret. As you listen to this interview, you'll feel me on that and what I'm talking about. But I'd like to just sit down and chat with her about some of the ways she's made a name for herself in her niche, how she's written so many books and overall has had a very fulfilling career in calligraphy. But let me know what you think about this week's episode with Margaret Shepherd. Hello, we have Margaret here to talk to us all about calligraphy, and she's written several books. And hello, Margaret, can you tell us a little bit about your life as an artist?
I certainly can, and I can give lots of advice because I've sort of covered the waterfront on all kinds of freelancing and jobs and education.
How did you get started into the arts, and how did you make your way into calligraphy as a specialty?
It's a kind of fluke because I flunked writing in third grade. I couldn't do it, and I didn't want to do it. So after I'd gotten used to the fact that I had terrible handwriting, somebody gave me a pen 10 years later. A calligraphy pen makes all the difference in the world. And I started experimenting it and encountered a teacher at college who was really interested in teaching me. And talk about flukes. He gave a course for 1 year, and 2 of us signed up for it. And the other student dropped out. So I had a private, dedicated teacher for a whole year. Then, after I started doing pieces of calligraphy, the appeal is so universal that all my fellow students wanted me to do things for them. And of course, that doesn't pay, but the alumni office hired me to do all kinds of graphics for their events. And, the light bulb went on in my head. I could make some money. I didn't know if I could make a living.
Yeah. So then it started there, and now you've written how many books?
I've written 20 books. I think that's it. I think that's enough. And my most recent book is special for American calligraphy. A lot of my colleagues don't even know that there is such a category. I'm a big fan of American style, American independence, American art.
Yeah. So when you were first starting out, you just basically got jobs from word of mouth. And what kind of things were you doing, like after you worked for the alumni office? Like, how did that go into writing books?
I still had to practice a lot and learn a lot. I was not a natural calligrapher. I really had to work hard. But I think that made me a good writer of a beginning book because I knew how hard it was. And I could make it seem easy for the reader. But first I taught a course for my fellow students right away, just turned around because, again, people were asking me and I liked explaining things. But they wanted me to do favorite quotes, and some of them were really awful. And I'm sure other calligraphers have had this experience where somebody wants you to do a job and the content is just dreadful. You sort of hold your nose and.
Like what kind of quote?
Oh, something cynical or a limerick with an off-color ending. You can do it, but you don't really enjoy it. And you're not learning something that you can then apply to your own work. That's why taking jobs is a good step, but you don't want to get stuck at that stage.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you make a career out of this? So you just took commissions and.
Well, I did. I looked up this quote for you. P.D. James says, never ask for a job and never refuse one. Once I graduated, I couldn't be fussy. I had to take every job that came. But I was too shy and sort of too naive to realize how to get my name around. So I tried a little bit of publicity, but then I just took any job that came. And one of them is addressing envelopes. Calligrapher's classic job is you work for someone who handles weddings or events or anything they're willing to pay at that time $1 an envelope to letter that, do beautiful lettering. But it's like getting paid to practice. So it's worth doing. I'm always finding calligraphers for whom that was sort of the basis that let them make something.
Yeah. So after that, what kind of jobs did you do? Did you find jobs that were like where you could make good money?
I got lucky. An old calligrapher that I knew died, and her family called me and said, we don't know what to do with her clients. Can you imagine that? If you're a freelancer, that somebody just hands their clients to you. It was really generous of them. And one of those clients was MIT, and MIT has a lot of graduation ceremonies, and they hand out a lot of diplomas. And so that's the kind of client that's any freelancer or any artist should look for. Repeat business, predictable business. They graduate at the same general time every year. And then I would charge $1 a line on diplomas. I'm sure it's a lot more now. And I didn't know enough to charge for the time I took to deliver them. I delivered them personally, and I thought, I don't need to charge for that. But again, I would recommend that to any freelancer. One of the first people I got in touch with was a famous calligrapher named Ed Carr in Boston. He'd been around for decades. And I sort of got my nerve up and said, well, how much do you charge? And he looked at me and he pulled out a stopwatch. And he said, I charge by the minute. And this is how I figure it. So that was an eye-opener.
How much did he charge per minute?
He wouldn't say.
Oh, that's gatekeeping.
Yeah, but the concept was good. And I had to figure out just how low I could price it and yet make enough off it and not have too much competition.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're telling me is if somebody wants to get into calligraphy, even if they have bad handwriting, I actually have bad handwriting too. And I do
congratulations.
Calligraphy. I know, right? But it's definitely a different thing. You're not thinking about like when I handwrite, I just go very quickly and I'm like, it's bad. But this, you take your time. And so anybody can learn this. Basically, that's my point. If you really want to, not that it's not hard, but and then so if you want to start getting jobs, make a friend that is a wedding planner or somebody who works in a university and do diplomas and fancy writing with invitations and stuff like that. And that's how you get your start.
Yeah. And the way you get those clients is you try to get out in the public eye as much as possible. And that can include, if you don't have a group in your town, form a group and put on a show. People don't always know all the possibilities of hiring a calligrapher. And you can put on a show that just says, here's what we do.
What do you mean a show?
Frame some of your calligraphy work and put it up.
Okay. Where?
but a group show, because then you're helping other calligraphers establish in the public eye what it is they do.
Where do you live?
I live in Boston.
Okay, so a big area. Okay, I was about to say in Springfield, Missouri, I don't think I know enough calligraphers where we could put on a show here. But I mean, there are a couple though, and I've learned under a couple master calligraphers here, and it is just so cool. I remember when I was first starting out, just to see them in person and like the way their hand moves and just the straight lines. And it's just, I was like, whoa. Like, and then
where did you see them? Because it's a good idea to do it like a neighborhood street fair or a benefit auction.
Yeah, we have this thing called the Arts Fest that's coming up. And I would say that's what would be a really good place to showcase if you were a calligrapher. But I ended up, the first time I got hired onto a mural job site was through Bass Pro Shops. And they hired me to do lettering because I had done some other stuff, but I was far from a professional calligrapher. But I just was like, yep, I can do it. And so their current calligrapher was quitting. And so he gave me a 2-day or like 1.5 day speed. Like this is how they like it. And I was like mind blown. Like, oh, wow. Okay, great. I can do this. Okay. And I was like in my room, like making lines and graphs on paper and trying to do the fancy serifs and whatnot. Like, okay, I can do this. Okay. But it's so much of a different art form than painting, like on a canvas, painting flowers. It's completely different. And I talk to people like muralists, they're like, they can do realism, like paint realistic barns and animals and stuff like that. And they're like, why can't I get this calligraphy thing down? I'm like, oh, no, sorry. Calligraphy is like math. Yeah. It's like, it's different, right? Is that kind of what you think too?
Well, there is an element of drudgery that you have to get over that. You have to be able to letter well enough that it doesn't take all your attention. And you have to not make mistakes. Typos are just what every calligrapher fears. And you don't want to make typos on a diploma. You don't want to make typos on a wedding invitation. You know, that's for somebody who's always making typos, it was a hard progress to make.
What typo have you made that sticks in your mind? Because I have one. Like I'll tell it too.
Yeah, I love it. You made me think of how one of the things I did when I got started was to work a street fair. And what was really helpful was I didn't just letter on a piece of paper for them. I lettered their name on a piece of paper that I had printed my information on. So, yeah, it was a children's fair and they all wanted to see their names in either italic or Gothic. You know, I made a little sign, but I made sure that anything they saved had my name on it. And I think that's something to be really careful about. You know, you can letter a favorite quote, and if you don't watch out, somebody will reproduce it and they'll leave your name off. So you get a lot of surprises about how the public sees you. So that would be one of those recommendations. You wanted some rules for freelancers. Put your name on everything.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, that's a great idea. And even a good idea for somebody who maybe isn't wanting to do calligraphy, but is signing up for an art show or whatnot, having a piece of paper with your name on it. So I would have Art by Andrea on there and then have a little sign that says, you know, I will letter like, what's your name? ? I will give you do you charge for it or do you just take tips or?
It depends what it's like. This was a children's fair. And I think I charged $1. And the parents were fine with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good idea.
And over the $1 and get their name on a nice little chunk of paper to put on their bedroom door.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. They go home and copy it. So that was a very nice thing.
You could even do an upsell with that. And so like if you're doing the name, you could even do an upsell, like I'll add a rainbow or I'll add a flower or something like that. So anybody at art shows, that's a really good idea. If you have any calligraphy interest at all, just doing their name really quick and then adding something just to like get hype going, like get people in line at your booth. Oh, I love that. That's a great idea.
And of course, in my day, you'd go around and leave your business card at every printer in the neighborhood. Now, that's no longer such a thing, but figure out where people are going when they want to find a calligrapher, because they'll be asking. And if they can't go online and find you, and they can't find you walking around in your town or with a bulletin board entry, you've got to make yourself visible. And that's, a lot of artists are a little shy, but you've got to get over that. You just have to be promoting yourself all the time.
Yeah. How do you suggest they would promote themselves?
I think it helps if you get a specialty. I mean, I got a specialty in diplomas, and MIT would pass my name to other organizations. Like Harvard Business School needed me to put some names on diplomas. And that was great. It was business that came in over the transom. That is, you're just sitting in your office and somebody calls you up and says, here, I've got a job. You don't know me, but I'm going to just bring you this job. And that's the best.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Do you have any tips for practicing calligraphy? So somebody's like, yeah, I want to get into this. Do they get your book? Do you have inside of your book? I actually haven't seen it yet, but do you have the practice lines?
I show in almost every book I've done, I sort of dissect the alphabet style that I'm recommending. Usually there's a dozen. In the most recent book, there's develop a specialty so that you get really good at it. And also you're known for it. I mean, there are people who love to do weddings. And I wouldn't, as soon as I was making enough to live on, I wouldn't touch weddings with a 10-foot pole, because you have to plow so much hand holding and soothing and therapy to the people who are having the wedding. And then you never hear from them again.
Oh, yeah, because they only get married once sometimes.
And if you're wondering how a real beginner would get started, I would recommend addressing envelopes like we talked about before. It's sort of day in, day out, steady business, not because you have a string of brides, but you have to have a wedding planner, or you want the person who makes the decisions. You don't want to deal with the mother of the bride or mother of the groom even. Take my advice on that.
Yeah.
They will talk your ear off, and it's hard to charge for that time.
Yeah.
Be businesslike.
True. Okay. So you would letter on envelopes and invitations, and then diplomas, and what other things?
I did a lot of work for a outfit. I think it's closed now, but it used to supply churches with printed material and also something called a Book of Remembrance, which are memorials with the names of donors on every page. It's very quaint, but there it was. They needed me. I would come in once a week and see what they had for me. And I didn't really aspire to spend my life doing freelance jobs. I had the creative bug. I like to do very far out, barely readable pieces. But I knew I had to get my name around, and I knew I had to get practice.
Okay. What other things do you get hired for? So say somebody's like, okay, I really like doing weddings, or really even there are some wedding portraiture artists that I know, and they do like wedding portraits at weddings. And so this might be an add-on to that, since you are already in the wedding scene. If you like to do both, this might be a good extra. Maybe what can somebody charge for that? I know it's probably been a while since you've done that, but
I understand.
Okay.
I think you want to charge $5 a line, and then you can back off from that.
Okay, so nowadays, if somebody were to get a wedding lettering job, you'd think maybe $5 a line.
It depends. If you're doing envelopes, probably less than that. If you're doing the quotation that they're using in the service and having it framed as a sort of presentation gift for somebody, then you charge a lot more. And you have to sort of school the client to appreciate what it is they're giving. You can't just say, oh, I'll do it per line. You have to let them know how much it's really worth. So say you'd had a quotation they're using in the service of 10 lines. You wouldn't just say, oh, that'll be $50. You'd probably start and say, that'll be $250. And then you can use it this way and that way and the other way. You have to be proactive in reminding the client what a great object they're getting and how they can put it to use. Otherwise they'll just think you're like a typist if you're not careful.
Okay, so say you would charge $2 per envelope now?
I have
$5
no
per
idea.
envelope?
The other thing you can do is call up your competition or your friends.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or that wedding planner or stationers that prints the wedding invitations. And just ask them. Say you're starting out and you'd like to know about their expertise. They may turn you down. Not everybody wants the competition.
Or you could call them and say you're getting married and say, how much do you charge per envelope?
No, I tried to recommend that. And this same calligrapher who had taught me about pricing, he kind of called me on it. He said, don't pretend. He said, just ask. Because if you pretend you're a bride, it'll come back and bite you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's better to be out front. I couldn't pull it off anyway.
Yeah. I would have a hard time as well, just being on the phone and being like, hi, they'd be like, where are you getting married? I'd be like, the park? I don't know. Okay. So if somebody's wanting to learn how to calligraphy, like how to become a calligrapher and how to do it better, you have several books. Can you explain some of your other books? I know you have one that's just coming out, but what kind of styles are they? Is it like, so you have 20 books. So is it every style ever?
Every style in the world, in fact. Okay. About 10 years ago, I did a book about world calligraphy. And you can take our alphabet and give it little touches that make it look like Arabic or Korean or Russian. And I give you all that information. I sort of dissect it and show you how to do it. But it's really helpful if you take a class. And it's very helpful if you take not just a class, that would go every week for a semester, but take a workshop where you go through. Yeah, I recommend workshops a lot because you get a big dose, but you only have to spend a weekend. And then you go home and practice. And you can ask all the other workshop attendees, how much do you charge?
Okay, I gotcha. So learning in person, it's definitely invaluable to learn in person for sure. And then you can be corrected as you go. What kind of tools do you use?
If you're just starting out, you will just try every pen you come across. So that's another reason it's good to take a class. Your teacher will zero right in on the materials you need so that you don't overbuy in the beginning. I mean, I must have 500 pens sitting in mugs around my studio and paper and ink. I didn't get enough advice when I was starting out, so I bought everything. And you really have to do that.
What would be a good thing for the beginner? So say I wanted to go and just practice and I wanted to grab your book and I wanted to just practice with something. What's a good tool to use? Like what is it called?
I learned on a dip pen.
Dip pen?
With a metal nib, but it's really tricky. It's almost hard to fill that pen with a dropper every half minute.
Yep, I have one and I realized how hard it was to do and it's been sitting there for 5 years. And
you don't want to start with a dip pen.
Is there something that's more beginner to learn with?
Yeah. I've always liked just using chisel-tipped felt pens.
Chisel-tip felt pens.
They're great for practice and they're terrific for doing sort of rough drafts and then showing them to somebody. If you're fussy, you could probably use a fountain pen.
Okay, so if you're fussy, get a felt pen.
Yeah, but the main thing is practice and then I mean, I can spend an hour telling you how to practice, but practice, say, on copy paper. That's fine for practice. And then go back and evaluate what you did. That's the trick. Don't just practice and grind in your mistakes. You want to look on each sheet, and a teacher can help you with this. You want to look on each sheet for what's the best letter.
Okay.
It, and then practice the next rows of letters. But don't just mindlessly practice. It's not about the muscles in your hand. It's about your eye.
Okay.
And you need to develop that no matter what art you're in.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling your story and giving us tips. And you maybe have inspired a future calligrapher to get out and do all the fun things.
Yeah. I wrote my first book 40 years ago, and it's been in print ever since then. It was just Learn Calligraphy. And it's you can use it if you're 10 years old. I mean, it's got little animals showing you what to do, but you can also learn from it as an expert. So I recommend that beginner's book, but also explore with the Learn American Calligraphy.
Okay. Where can they get your book?
Anywhere.
Anywhere. Amazon, everywhere.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations for your 20th book. That is amazing. You've had such a lifetime career that I'm glad that you sat down with us and just to tell us all about it. And we appreciate you. So thank you.
I hope it's helpful to your listeners. I mean, I did everything wrong at some point. So I can certainly warn them about what to do right.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. This is definitely a very specialized thing, but I think it's just, I like learning about all different types of art. I think it's so interesting how different artists get their start because it's all intertwined. You know, we all do something very similar. You just take what you can get and then just go up from there. And now you've written books and this is so great.
Well, I will recommend that no matter if you're a beginner or not, teach somebody else. You will learn a lot about your craft by teaching it to someone else. Plus, if you offer it as a course at, say, a local adult ed center, 5,000 people who get that mailing will see your name. Just getting known for teaching, even if you only have a few students, it's really important to kind of tag this subject as belonging to you.
Yeah, you have definitely solidified yourself as a calligraphy expert with now teaching it and just doing it for all the years. And you really specialized. And I think several people are looking for their niche in that way, you know, a lot of different ways. And so that's a really good tip. Even if somebody doesn't want to get into calligraphy, you know, find your niche and then just be all over it. Like I'm all over murals. I teach murals. I host events. I paint them. Like I definitely see the benefit of, you know, specializing and you know, but also like dabbling in other things. Do you do other fun crafty things? Like I do other like forms of art, but just really for fun.
Well, I had to give up pattern knitting because it was so much like the same muscles and the same eye talent that you use in calligraphy with all those little letters, sort of like rows of knitting. I've never been able to go back to it. It's just too much of the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. I feel you. Yes. Sometimes I just like can't do anything with a paint, but lately I've taken up gardening. And so I'm like, I'm being creative in that way.
Much better contrast.
Exactly. It's nice to have contrast. Okay. Well, thank you again so much. I'll put links to everything. The links to all of the books and all the things will be in the show notes. So if anybody's listening here and you want to just click the link, it'll take you right to her book and right to her website. You can see more and follow along with your journey. So thank you so much, Margaret.
And I do answer questions. So
good. Okay.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Artist Academy podcast. If you like this art and business talk in audio form, then I want to invite you to get my book. It's called Mural Money: How to Grow Your Art Business from Zero to Six Figures. So starting from the very bottom, like you don't even have a website yet. You have nothing. You're not sure where to go and you want to make money with a paintbrush. You want to have your creativity pay the bills. I have taken so much of the advice that I've gotten from artists from this podcast. I've been doing one episode for over 5 years now. So many interviews, so many good bits of advice. So I've taken the best of that advice and put it in my book, along with so many stories and lessons learned that I've had in my own mural career of just how I would go back and save a whole lot of time if I just knew these steps. It's a 15-hour audiobook. And so if you like this podcast, if you're listening to interview after interview, I know that you're going to like the book. So go to muralmoney.com. It's for anybody who wants to grow their art business with a paintbrush. Muralmoney.com. And I will see you next week for another episode of the Artist Academy podcast.